impossible to buy a product or stay in a hotel or do anything. Go and hear our kids perform a song in their school choir. And what do they sing to us? Well, my daughter the other day sang to me a song called "When Will We Learn?" And what I learned from this song was that I should feel really bad about myself. I feel that I have not respected Gaia enough. I feel that my very presence on Earth, in fact, to quote one of our favourite books, Limits to Growth, or the Club of Rome, the Earth has a cancer, and the cancer is man. So I learned to feel bad about myself. I think that's very important. I want to feel better about myself by doing green things, and it's good that the Post Office, Marriott Hotels, and so on, and Chris Huhn, my Environment Secretary, are putting me on the path to ecological righteousness. How did we get here? How did we get to this point where almost everything, we can scarcely breathe without inhaling eco-fascist propaganda? What has happened to the world? This is the question that I set out to answer in a truly stupendously brilliant book that I recommend you all buy in vast quantities, not just for yourselves, but for your friends and families, enemies. The book is called Watermelons. I think you're all familiar with the pun. Green on the outside, red on the inside. Now there is some, climate stuff in there, stuff about climate gate. But I feel a bit of it, as I said last year when I spoke at the Chicago conference, I feel a bit of an imposter talking about the science. I'm not a scientist, you may be aware. I read English literature. I leave the science stuff to you guys, and I think it's good that we stick to our jobs. But I think what I try to do is inject a note of realism into the debate about climate change. You guys are doing it very successfully with the hard science. But also, I think you may just about be aware that this debate is not just about science, it is also about politics. And I think it's very important that the scam is exposed on every level, not just the scientific one, but also the ideological one. And I think that at the moment, some very, very bad things are being done in the name of environmentalism. Indeed, I sense a mentality in the green movement which I call the "in order to save the city, we must destroy it" mentality. Look at wind farms, for example. Wind farms are supposedly designed to save Mother Gaia by producing low-carbon energy. What do these wind farms actually do? Well, they chop up bats. Do environmentalists not like bats? Is it because they're scary? Are they fearful they might turn into vampires or something? Is that the level of scientific understanding among the environmentalists? Birds, what about birds? I thought, Audubon Society, all these organisations, the Sierra Club, does the Sierra Club not like birds? Birds get chopped up by these things. What about all the rare earth minerals that are mined in China under extremely ecologically unfriendly circumstances? Is this okay because it happens in China out of sight? What about the soil which is destroyed pretty much forever by the massive concrete bases needed for these monstrosities? What about the views that are destroyed? What about the landscapes that are blighted, possibly forever? Because I don't see any thought being put into decommissioning these things. I mean, if these were nuclear power plants, then the Greens would be all over them. But somehow, because it's wind and wind blows so naturally, somehow wind farms are okay. So this is what I try and address in this book. The science I talk about in the first half, and in the second part, I talk about what it is that Greens actually believe. How did they get there to where we are today? And what you see pretty soon when you start reading the great texts of the Green movement. I'm thinking of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. I'm thinking of Paul Ehrlich's the population bomb, and I'm thinking most notoriously of the Club of Rome's limits to growth. And what these guys believe is, well, I mentioned this before, the Earth has a cancer, the cancer is man. Essentially, they have a deeply misanthropic view of mankind, which is that we are the problem, not the solution, and that there is this thing called overpopulation, and that somehow it must be reduced, either directly, as for example those Great Greens the Nazi Germans did, or indirectly, as Rachel Carson managed to achieve by effecting a pretty much a worldwide ban on DDT. Also, a key tenet of the green religion, and it is a religion, I think we all know that, is the idea that there are these things called scarce resources, and that scarce resources must be preserved for future generations. Now, even though the situation I describe in my book is a very gloomy one, this is not a book of despair, this is a book of optimism. Because what I argue in the end, I don't want to spoil the ending, this is no reason not to buy the book, you understand. There's lots more to it. There's jokes and stuff, and fun, and facts. What I point out is that this green Weltanschauung, in which one must choose between either economic growth or caring for nature. This is an entirely false dichotomy, that in fact economic growth and environmentalism go hand in hand. Many of you will be familiar with the Kuznets curve, the idea that when a country achieves a certain sort of GDP per capita, at that point they can afford to start doing nice environmental stuff. Look at where the really bad environmental stuff happened in the last century. It was in the communist world, it was behind the Iron Curtain, it was not in the Western world. By the same token, as societies grow richer, so they have more money to set aside for all those things that we all like on both sides of the argument, whether we're warmists or realists or whatever you want to call us, and fluffy, bunny-hugging eco-activists. We all want the same world. None of us, I'm fond of saying, none of us looks at a beach and thinks, hey, you know what would really improve that beach? If it was covered with a nice oil slick, with a dying pelican and a few baby sea otters getting... None of us thinks this way. We all love the sea otters, we all love the pelicans, we all love the pristine sands and the crystal clear waters. We all want this stuff. And as a kind of nature boy myself, you know, somebody who likes long country walks, somebody who's just recently taken up surfing and thinks that's the coolest thing too, I really resent the implication that me and people like me and people like you are nature haters. We are nature lovers. And you know, all I'd like to do, by way of a conclusion, is to just mention a discussion I had with some friends last night, with Ron Bailey and Julian Morris and Pat Michaels and Myron Eagle, and we were all saying, we were talking about how we're constantly being accused of being funded by big oil and big carbon and big evil and stuff, and we all agreed that this was a bit of a pernicious myth, that in fact we are so totally on the wrong side of the argument if we want to make money. Because as we all know here, to our bitter cost, all the money goes onto the other side. 3,500 times more money goes into funding warmism than goes into funding skepticism, according to Joan Over. But I would like to say one thing to you guys. I would rather be living in a hovel with all of you than in a mansion with Al Gore.